boys and girls, please put your hands together and give a big white horse welcome to the red chair from Mr. Andrew Mangan. Andrew, a lot of people have come here tonight because they're familiar with Arseblog, and they're beginning to get familiar with Castaway Media. But I want to start by going back in time to when you were 16 years old.
What do you know?
Yeah, you see, I also got a DeLorean, and just like Michael J. Fox. Tell us about your first experience in the radio game when you were 16 years of age. Tell us all about that.
This was, I think, about 1988, something like that. And there was a lot of pirate radio at the time. Pretty much all the radio was pirate radio, actually. So it would have been before, maybe 1987, something like that. Anyway, Radio Dublin operated out of this big old house on Inchicore Road in Dublin. Really grand house. It could have been if it wasn't a total kip with a radio station in one of the rooms. Yeah. So I went up, knocked on the door, was brought in to see the man who ran the station, a guy called Eamon Cook, Captain Cook they called him, because he was a bit of a pirate. And, subsequent to that, he's turned out to be a really not very nice man at all. There's no need to bring the tone down. But anyway, I decided I'd spin him this yarn about how I wanted to do communications in college, and I wanted to be a radio presenter. I really did. I wanted that was my thing. I wanted to be a radio guy. So I went in and I would work ever so hard, and if you give me a chance, and I'm going to do communications, and I'm going to study this, study that. And he went, "You're on Friday night at 9 o'clock.
Holy shit.
And I went, shit.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Wow.
So I turned up. My mother gave me a lift down to this radio station. You were shown briefly how to work it. I remember the guy on before me was a morbidly obese man who barely fit on the stool that they had in the studio. It was this strange sort of metal stool, and he spilled over it. It was bizarre, really weird.
Yeah.
So I had to go along with a box of records and play the records and talk between the records and answer phone calls and do requests and play ads. And in those days, everything was on cassette, so you had to listen to a cassette. There was a beep, then you had to pause the cassette and play it, and it was all very frightening and but brilliant at the same time.
Were they your records? Were they your
you had to bring your own
favorites?
records. Yeah, you could play whatever you wanted, so it was whatever I liked. But there was maybe a few singles around the place. But
sure.
That was it. That was my introduction to radio.
At what point, as you know, as a younger boy, were you kind of sitting in your room or whatever, introducing the next record on your turntable or whatever, or how did the whole thing come
I don't quite know. I can remember I used to live in England.
Yeah.
I was born there, and my dad ran a hotel in Yorkshire. Okay. Which was it was a big castle in just outside Hull. So I grew up in a castle until I was 10. So every house I've lived in since has been a profound disappointment. But downstairs in the reception, they had this gigantic, I don't know, you remember you used to see pictures of old computers and they would be the size of a wall or a warehouse. Sure. And this was a gigantic unit, metal, with all these knobs, and it directed the radio to all the rooms, so you could change the radio. So you go to change the radio stations. And I can remember at that age, probably being 8 or 9, listening to the top 40, because I used to do the top 40 every Sunday on BBC Radio 1. And I think from there that just sort of sparked my interest. It was the idea that some guy far away could come out of this machine and just play music. I think that's where it came from.
Was your thing? So you gave us a hint that you were going to when you finished school do something like that. So what happened next?
Well, I was going to do the boring arts degree thing. Okay. Unlike Richard, I didn't really get my act together in 5th and 6th year, and my leaving cert was very average. Okay. And I think I missed out on that by about a point, which was great. So I went to senior college in Ballyfermot, and I did a diploma in broadcasting and journalism, which was good. It was good fun, a lot of practical stuff. Most of it utterly redundant by the time I'd come out of it, because we were learning to edit on old reel-to-reel tape, so you had to mark the tape and put the pieces back together, and then all of a sudden the world goes digital. The same with journalism and what have you. So that's what I did for 2 years there, and got a good merit or whatever it was. But at the time, all the time I was working as a DJ, playing in nightclubs and playing records and doing all that kind of stuff at the same time, and doing bits and pieces of radio work here and there. So yeah.
And from your experience in that college environment, what path did that push you on, or can you even recognize any pieces of that path which has brought you to, let's say,
No, not really, because I've been doing pirate radio since I was 16. So by the time I left college at 20, I felt like I had plenty of experience, and that was still all that I wanted to do, was work on the radio. I ended up working for a pirate radio station that's set up in Dublin called Kiss FM, which was after all the stations had been legalized. So we were very illegal, but we were very popular. We were playing. Because when all the legal stations came in, they all stuck to this format of playing middle of the road music, and we played top 40 hits, and the kids loved it. Like, they loved this radio station. So we worked really hard on that. We were so popular that a certain Dublin radio station decided that they would jam us. Wow. From their broadcasting organisation. There were legal problems. The guards were involved. I remember one morning we were told that there was going to be a raid on the transmitter site, which was up the Dublin mountains. So we were bizarrely agreed to do this, given the fact we weren't being paid, of course. This was pirate radio. Myself and another guy decided that we would take the morning shift, and we would watch out. The idea was that if the Department of Communications came along, you'd run in, take the transmitter and run down, because the transmitter was pretty expensive. Okay. So we're sitting there at 7:30 on a Thursday morning going, this is bullshit. Nobody's going to come. Yeah. And then we looked down, and it's like,
here they come.
Here they come.
Okay.
So vans and guards and the whole lot.
Did they have a uniform or a special kind of
no, that we knew. I mean, there's 2 Garda cars and a big van, and it had a satellite dish or something on the top, just to give it away, Yeah. So we ran in, took the transmitter out of a barn that it was in. We ran down the hill, buried the transmitter in a pile of gorse, and felt really happy with ourselves for about 2 seconds, until we remembered that his car was parked right up the top.
Oh, yikes.
So we then had to make our way back there.
Okay.
And of course they knew exactly who we were and what we've done. They didn't buy the story that we were just out for a gentle walk at 7:30, 2 23, 24-year-old guys looking pretty hungover. Yeah. We didn't look like, ramblers.
Your typical mindful walkers or anything like that.
We certainly weren't. So, so eventually we kind of got away with that. So that radio station closed down in the November, and I remember that I was asked to go to a meeting with the program controller from FM 104. And I thought, this is great. Yeah. Maybe a job in FM 104. Unfortunately, he introduced me to the program controller from Tip FM. Okay. And Tip FM is a fine radio station, but not the place you necessarily want to be at 24, 25 years.
It certainly wasn't as cool as the
No, it wasn't. So I ended up working. I ended up working in Tip FM for about a year before I could take it no longer. Yeah. And had to move back to Dublin.
So what was the heaviest weight that was pressing down on you as you were doing your merry thing in Tip FM? Was it just
doing 6 hours of radio every day. Okay. They had me doing 2 shows a day. So I'd come in and do a show from 12 until 2 in the afternoon, and then go home and do a show from 8 until midnight. And that's a lot of radio, and it's a lot of playing Mary Black and stuff. Okay. I mean, I'm sure she's a lovely lady, but there's only so much you can take. So, and financially, it wasn't necessarily the most rewarding place either. So I think it was just a bit of burnout, to be honest. Yeah.
And did you think at that time, say, screw it, maybe radio isn't for me, or did you still have hope that you could make it?
It felt a little bit, because there was a real freedom on Kiss FM to be able to do what we wanted. So it was chaotic, really, but we could do what we wanted. Whereas if you go into a legal radio station, you're told what to play, when to play it, what to say, when to say it. You've got cards, you know, it felt very restrictive. So I wasn't necessarily that keen on doing that. So I stayed DJing. I did some production work, radio production work, voiceover work, recording ads, that kind of stuff for East Coast radio. And then I was involved in a car accident, and I was out of work for about 9 months.
Wow.
And then I didn't do anything in that era for a long time. I became a manager in Aircom, or it was Telecom Maron, maybe. TINet, doing technical support for actually I think it was Indigo, if anyone remembers.
Yeah,
Indigo,
I do.
the ISP. I actually met somebody recently who still has an Indigo email address.
I know the very same. That's the weirdest thing. I got an email last week with a lady with an Indo.
But anyway, so
we're old a bit of it.
I did about 4 years of that, and then I would sit in my back garden. I'd come home and sit in the back garden and look at a plane and go, I don't really care where that plane is going, but I want to be on it. I don't want to do not mindless, but middle management, spreadsheets, that kind of stuff.
And at that point, through that phase, had you, for the want of a better phrase, had you given up on, call it the radio dream, that sense of you broadcasting, communicating to a lot of people? Did you see it as something that was buried in the bottom of the garden, or was it still there as, you know, it'll come?
I would say probably that I won't say I gave up, but it just the practicalities of life, in that you have a house and you have a mortgage and a wife and a child, means that you've got to earn a living. And, you know, the job at Aircom was a pretty good job. The money was regular. It was just mind-numbing. And I think when you're perhaps your brain is wired creatively, and then you're put into a position where you have to work in a very structured environment, that people expect the same things from you over and over again. There's repetition in what you have to do. I don't think it's healthy in the long run. So I moved to Spain.
Yes. That's the next obvious step.
Yeah.
So tell us about Spain. What was going on there?
Went on holidays, loved it, and said we should move here. And we came back and said we're moving to Spain, and everyone went, you've been on holidays. Everyone says that when they came back, and we went, watch. And we did. Wow. So we sold our house and moved to Spain. Cool. Yeah.
Can you remember that day in Spain when, I don't know, when you sat down? I suppose everyone sat down then. Now people have standing desks, and it's the latest thing.
Treadmill desks.
Treadmill desks is the new thing, by the way.
I mean, what asshole uses one of those?
I don't know. Not me.
Fuck's sake.
Anyway, so we're in Spain.
We're in Spain.
And that first day that ass went into seat and fingers went onto keyboard, and the words Arsenal were typed into a keyboard. Can you remember your first missive?
I remember why it happened, because part of what I was doing before I left for Spain, with the same guy that we did the transmitter run with. We've had a very unsuccessful business life together. We used to do some gigs, and like 3 people would turn up. I remember his car went on fire one night. Just in Goatstown, we had to run into a shop and buy like 3 bottles of Ballygown and just pour them into the thing, rather than run away from the car.
I know,
which we should have done. But anyway, we had set up a small business to try and build websites for people. So if you have a shop and you want an online presence, we give you a basic website, your email, and all that kind of stuff. So part of my job in that was to do the designing, and I really wasn't much of a designer. So what I wanted to do was have a website that I could practice on, that I could figure out how to do things. That you just keep doing it, and then you learn. A bit like what Richard was saying earlier, that you just learn by doing. So I was trying to figure out what would be a website that would give me the kind of content that I could update regularly, and eventually I settled on Arsenal. As an Arsenal fan, I figured, well, look, there's always something happening with a football club, regardless of what football club it is. There's a match, or there's a scandal, or there's transfers, or there's news, or someone's got injured, or whatever it might be. And I'd been reading a lot of blogs, simply because in Spain they had broadband way before we had it here in Ireland. So I had this mighty fast 512 kilobit broadband. Wow. It was amazing.
It's like
it was like living in the future.
Pinned back or whatever.
Yeah, it was literally. You know that picture of the guy sitting in the chair, the MTV. It was like that. It was amazing. So
Images and everything.
Yeah, like images. Like that. It was brilliant.
Yeah.
So that was what I did. I started. I thought, well, I'll write a blog about Arsenal. And what do you call a blog about Arsenal except Arseblog?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's brought some unwelcome searches over the
I
years.
can only imagine. you often hear of, when people say, people have found our website via this bizarre search. So yeah. So what kind of really bizarre stuff have you had over the years?
Well,
or what can we
there's a lot of
say in public?
arse-related stuff.
Okay.
Obviously, I don't think we need to go
I
too
think
in depth.
Okay, that kind of covers it. As you, let's say, were building a little bit of, for the want of a better word, blogging muscle in your early months in Spain doing that, did you have a sense that you had an ambition around what it was going to be, or at that point was it just a thing to do?
It was kind of a thing to do because I was working over there. We had sort of gone over, and for the first few months we were able to relax for a bit, but I was working, so it was just something to do, and it was a way initially for me to try and further the other thing that I was doing, but it became apparent fairly quickly that design is not my thing. Okay. But writing was, and I'd done the journalism course. I'd always written as a teenager, terribly painful crap short stories and all those kind of things.
All right.
But it was something that I always enjoyed doing, and I kind of enjoyed the freedom of being able to write whatever I wanted, in whatever style I wanted, whenever I wanted.
Yes.
So that was quite liberating, and it allowed me to, you could be funny, you could be serious, you could take the mick out of other football teams, you could do silly photoshops, you could be really, really creative. And I think having come from the environment in Aircom where, you're going to work, you're doing a shift, you're coming back, doing the same thing. And look, when people ring up for internet technical support, the only time they got to talk to me was when they were really, really angry because I was a manager. So can I speak to a supervisor? And then it's like, I don't have time for really angry people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry that your email doesn't work, but have you tried putting the right password in?
Yeah, I know.
That kind of thing. So, so from that point of view, it was really liberating to be able to be creative and to just do what I wanted. Yeah.
And at what point did that process kind of bring you to a stage where you said, holy shit, people are noticing this, people are saying things back? I assume that was in the, of course you still have comments, but if you put something up, people comment on it, or how were people engaging in the
Well, initially we didn't have any comments, and then somebody said you should put comments, because I didn't use like a blogging tool, like a Blogger, or there was no WordPress back then. It was blogger.com was the one that people used. But what I was doing was just hand coding a HTML page every day. So I'd write and update it, and then eventually we found this thing that plugged in, and we could use comments, and we'd get 8 or 12 comments over the course of a day, and then people would come back, and that would start to grow slowly. This was 2002, so it grew quite slowly, and I think what made it take off was I got a job in Barcelona. Again, it was a really terrible job. Those things where you go to, it was for the IKEA website, and you go in and you go, a little cartoon face pops up and goes, how can I help you? Yeah. And we were going, I want to know about the Malmo fucking bookcase, whatever it is. So my job was not anything cool to do with the little face popping up. It was to it was data entry, to put in all the various responses for all the thousands and thousands of IKEA products. It was terrible, but it was money. But what happened was I lived in a town just outside Barcelona, so I had to get the train every morning into Barcelona. So I would do the blog first thing in the morning. Okay. So it would be done and ready. So it was up and published by 7:30 Spanish time. So that's like 6:30 in the UK and Ireland. And what happened was people got used to that being ready for them first thing in the morning, and it became like a morning ritual, became a morning read. Like they'd take the paper, they'd read Arseblog. Wow. This was just became part of their day, and that was the first real kick that the site got from producing the content at more or less the same time every day. So there was that expectation from people that when they got up in the morning, there was going to be something fresh to read. And that's actually part of your signature now, right? That thing of, it's going to be there every morning. In fact, I've heard you say or comment that, people start giving you shit if it's not there by 8 o'clock. You get Yeah, you'll see people start to get antsy and
Yeah.
wonder if I've slept it out or died or
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
They,
good
they, I
that
mean,
you're
those are
concerned.
the extremes.
Yeah,
He's
wow.
either slept it out or he's dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's still a thing, but I mean
Yeah.
that's part and parcel of what I do and how I've done it. That if you start doing something and people react to it in a positive way, then keep doing it.
Yeah.
Keep doing it that way.
And at what point did the thing evolve to a position where you think, we can make a few quid from this, and maybe that opens up other options where I don't have to work crappy jobs for the likes of IKEA or wherever?
That's a good question. I remember one of the guys who used the website worked for a big agency, a big advertising agency in the UK, and he said, we want to run a campaign on the website for, I think it was something to do with O2, and he said, how much would it cost? And I said, I don't know, actually,
Yeah.
300 quid?
Yeah.
And he went,
Sounds good.
no.
Really? He was that good to
Listen,
you?
I'll come back to you. And he gave me a figure which
Okay.
was, thousands. And I
Good.
went, what?
Yeah.
What the hell is going on here?
Wow.
So at that point, I sort of realized that there was some value
Hmm.
monetarily to what I was doing.
Yeah.
But it took a while for that really to be realized.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably about 2005, 2006 when that happened. And really, I'd just been sort of working and doing my job, and this
Yeah.
was still a sideline.
Yeah.
This wasn't still had no idea that this could be something that could be turned into a business or how to turn it into
Sure.
a business or
Yeah.
anything like that. So, yeah.
So did Arseblog bring you back to Dublin, or did all that other stuff
Yeah.
happen and then you just
Yeah,
kept
life
going?
sort of brings you back, family and friends here.
Yeah.
And so we came back in 2006 and I kept doing it. I came back to do whatever other work I could do. We had some basic advertising revenue from it, but not much. I came back to do other work, voiceover work,
Yes.
and whatever else I could find. And in I was being paid by this website to do a podcast for them because I started a podcast on Arseblog in 2006, and this football site called Ole Ole came along and said, look, we want you to do a podcast for us. So I did a podcast for them. They were paying me to do that. And then they decided that they wanted to acquire the website. They wanted to sort of give themselves a real kickstart. The idea was to become a Facebook of football for football fans, that kind of thing. So they acquired my blog and a Tottenham blog. I think there was a Liverpool one, a Spurs one, a Barcelona one, a Real Madrid one, and they brought me to LA, which is where they were based, which was fantastic. They put me up on Rodeo Drive in this like pretty swish boutique hotel, and then I didn't see anyone for about a day and a half, so that was a bit weird.
Yeah.
I went to the offices and made a deal with them, and they didn't buy it outright per se, but they paid me every month, like over the course of a contract, a 3-year contract. They were paying me every month to do the website. A good salary.
Great.
A good salary. So
and what, like, at that point, was it still very much your thing? Because you spoke about saying things in your way, in your style, and your
yeah,
own
that was
unique-
something I
was that
discussed
still-
with them at the start. I said, look, I understand if we're going onto this network, there'll be a few changes you might want to make, but ultimately, I'm not going to change the way I write or the way that I produce my content. And if that's a problem, then we can go different ways, and they were happy enough with that. Although they did make one small change, because the original strapline of the site, which was terrible when I started in 2002, was Arseblog, the inconsequential ramblings of an Arsenal fan, which is terrible. But that year, Arsenal won the FA Cup, and there was an interview on live television, and the guy came up to Freddie Ljungberg and said, "Freddie, you've won the FA Cup, how does it feel?" And he went, "It's fucking excellent."
Right there on
And
live
so that
TV.
became the strap line of the site, which
to
they
be
then got
forgotten.
rid of because they said, look, they're a commercial, these
The US is
top brand advertisers don't want to advertise on a site with the word fucking in the title. So
Fair enough.
so that was a small concession from my point of view,
Okay.
but from a stylistic point of view and content point of view, I
Yeah.
was able to do what I wanted as before.
And this almost feels like a kind of a classic Pat Kenny setup. And then, when things were looking so good, how did it go horribly wrong?
Well, they stopped paying me.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's pretty much where it went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
You get wages 1 month and then not
Yeah.
another month, and then half wages, and then, 6 months down the line, 7 months down the line, you realize there's a big problem.
Okay.
A financial problem. And it got to a point where they basically had no money left, and couldn't pay anyone, and couldn't pay any of the money that they owed me. Thankfully, in the contract that I signed with them, I had a stipulation that if they went down at any point, all rights to the content and to the website and to the domain name reverted to me.
Great.
So thankfully, one of the guys on the site who uses the site regularly is an IP barrister.
Okay.
He was able to draft me the perfect letter to send to them.
Wow.
To make sure that we got it back. Took a couple of weeks, but that was in October 2010.
Okay.
And after that, everything came back to me. And so it was just me in a financial hole with a website that wasn't really earning any money. So,
wow.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a case of you buying it back. It was just a case of picking it up legally from the embers of their disaster.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
Essentially, yeah.
Wow. So at that point, was your stomach there for rebuilding the thing, or were you just, what was your mindset at that point?
Well, look, there was part of me that thought, well, I'm going to have to go get a job. And then I thought, well, jobs are shit.
Okay.
Really.
Yeah, you clearly demonstrated that.
I've had them and I didn't like them, so I said I'm not going to do it anymore.
Good.
I figured that, look, I can give this a try and just see what I can make out of it.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't left on the street. It was difficult. It was a difficult few years, but I still had other work. And I was at a point where I thought, well, look, what else can I do with the site?
Yeah.
To generate revenue, to generate income, and
Sure.
ultimately, I bought a whiteboard. You know the way people do when they're brainstorming. And ultimately, it was just covered in my doodles.
Okay.
Of just me drawing silly men on it.
Yeah.
But there's a thing in the top corner. Which says, this was my philosophy, it said more content equals more visitors.
Okay.
More visitors equals more page views. More page views equals more revenue. So I had to figure out how I was going to make more content, and then turn that content and turn those stories and page views into advertising revenue.
Sure. So presumably that led to you saying, okay, there's only so much one man can do here. I need to start, leveraging all these other guys, bringing in other guys. So had that, obviously, when the Ole Ole thing, it changed that context, right? Because there were other people involved. But tell me about that journey. How did you start involving other people to expand that?
Well,
content.
I think you're right. There's only so much content one guy can produce, and I think there's also a danger of oversaturating if one guy is just doing all the content. I mean, I think it's really important for a website to have its own style and its own voice, and for people to know what to expect from the content that's produced on a website, but there's got to be a bit of variety. So I've seen, obviously, other people writing about Arsel, and I asked a couple of guys if they'd come on board and do columns. I can't remember exactly. That was October 2010, so maybe June 2011 we set up another site called Arseblog News.
Okay.
So the blog would be, as it always was, so like a roundup of the day's events where the podcast existed, but this would be another site where we would do match reports, we would do stats, we would do transfer stories, injury stories, basically any story that we felt had merit around Arsenal, we would do that. And there was a website at the time called sport.co.uk, I think, and they went under, and one of the guys, another guy called Andrew Allen, he was sort of left out of a job there, and I said, look, I'm thinking of starting this thing. It felt to me like a big commitment, because once you start doing that, as I said earlier, you build the expectation. So people want a match report for every game, and they want stats and they want reaction and all that kind of stuff. And it's 7-day-a-week stuff.
Yeah.
You know. So I asked him to come on board, and look, I wasn't in a position to pay him other than a share of advertising revenue.
Okay.
So he came on board, and we've grown that site quite a lot over the last 4 years.
And how important has that been, just from a technical point of view or even a commercial point of view, putting, you know, that content out in that kind of format when it comes to bringing in the visitors, the page views, and the monetization? Has that been the essential element to it, or has it just been an add-on? Or if you understand what I mean, you know.
I'm not quite sure I do.
Like, is it the single biggest thing that's brought it forward, or is it just an additional element, or is it still your morning blog, which is still the thing?
No, I mean, I think probably by its nature, the news site has a bigger reach because you're reacting, or you're connecting with people more often.
Yeah.
So one blog in the morning, it's done and dusted. You come in, you read it. There's nothing else on the website until the next morning. We do have other bits and pieces, other columnists now that sort of flesh it out. But you could do 10 stories one day on the news site. Might only do 1 or 2 another day if it's quiet. But that one has really sort of expanded the reach, and it brought the site to a different audience and a different kind of audience. But at the same time, we've tried to maintain the style that sort of permeates throughout, that like football is important and everyone loves it. It's a big passion for people, but it's also football. It's not life and death. You've got to have a little bit of a sense of humor about things, you know, particularly when you're Arsenal over the last few years, you've got to really have a sense of humor.
At the very least philosophical, and ideally, let's not even talk about that. I'm clearly not there. So when you talk about the initial podcasting within the Arseblog context, was that very much like revisiting the 16-year-old in the pirate radio station? Yeah,
it was a light bulb moment, because it was like podcasts in 2006 were very rare. They seemed overly technical, and I sort of had a look at them, and then I realized it's just a guy talking into a microphone and talking to another person, or maybe doing, you know, a bit of music or whatever it is. So from a technical point of view, having done the production side of things, I was confident that I could do it. So I bought a microphone, a USB microphone. It never occurred to me to buy a microphone stand. So for the first 4 or 5 podcasts, I have this microphone. It was in like a mug of pencils, sort of stuck up in the mug of pencils, and I'd sit there like that and try and talk into the microphone. And after about 5 episodes, I realized, you know what, a microphone stand would be a good idea. You should think about one of those.
Wonderful things.
So yeah, that was really enjoyable to get behind the microphone again. And what was good about it was that I could do whatever I wanted. I could say what I wanted, the way I wanted to say it. I could do little funny skits.
Yes.
The first podcast, I think, was not long after that incident with Petr Cech and Stephen Hunt.
Oh yeah.
Remember when
he
you kneed him in the head, and you know. And I think one of the things I did was I rang up. Arsenal were playing Reading in the next game, and I rang up Reading and recorded the phone call, and I asked him if Jens Lehmann should wear a helmet.
Okay.
And the guy went, "What?" And just put the phone down naturally, as you would. But you know, it was just the freedom to be able to do those kind of things.
Yes.
So yeah, that was really enjoyable.
Wow. And can you remember, like, in that era, I know we're in something of a golden age of podcasting, we would talk about that in a sec, but can you remember what was your distribution medium at that point? Was it through literally embedded in the website, or there was nowhere else to go?
I mean, we would upload the file to the Arseblog website, and people would download it. Simple as that. We had a little audio player on the site. We didn't have a podcast hosting company or anything like that. We just literally uploaded the MP3 onto the server, until such time as that became a ridiculous thing, because bandwidth and all that costs money. And the more popular, you know, if you're downloading 25, 30 megabyte MP3, you know, it doesn't take long for the bandwidth to really get eaten up. So we had to find solutions to that quite quickly. So
I'm fascinated now, having, let's say, achieved a sustained period of success with Arseblog. One of the things that occurred to me watching Arsenal over the last few years, and bear with me folks, this is possibly our only little bit of football related chattery, is that it seems to be like this Groundhog Day where every year, for good or for better or for worse, it's more or less the same themes are coming up. For whatever, we just seem to be locked in this eternal pattern. Do you find then that, you know, in terms of what you want to say every morning and, you know, feeling excited about the, you know, what angle can we take on this content, do you ever find yourself kind of like, Jesus, there's multiple levels of deja vu about this, or here we go again, how do I come at this from a different angle?
Sure, yeah. There are obviously familiar themes, but I think the context of each of them is usually a bit different. And also I think it's not something that's unique to Arsenal. The sameness, the Groundhog Day is the same for the team that struggles near the bottom as one that struggles near the top. And ultimately, even if Arsenal haven't done as well as people might like, they've been in the top 4 the entire time. You know, it's still pretty good. It's frustrating when you come at it after a period of really big highs and the Invincibles and great players, and then there are reasons why things slumped, obviously. But that's the nature of football. The football is cyclical anyway. So you look at what's happened to Manchester United after a long period at the top. They changed their manager, everything went to shit. It's quite funny, of course.
I can see you would enjoy it.
Fans.
We could get booed out of the room.
But you know, that's just the nature of what you're writing about. But there's enough difference. Players change, opposition changes, the way you lose changes, the way you win changes. So there's always something. There's no danger of it getting boring, I don't think.
Okay, good. What would you say is the best thing about being Arseblog right now, or being the man behind Arseblog? What gives you most fun from it?
Probably still the podcasts.
Okay.
The podcasts are great fun. And probably over the course of doing the website, realizing that what I do, people enjoy it. So, some people enjoy it, some people don't enjoy it. I used to get a little bit hung up on people who didn't, and now I don't care. I genuinely don't care, because there's enough out there for people. If someone's creating content for you and giving you content free every single day, 7 days a week, and you don't like it, just don't read it. Don't complain to me. Just go read something else. I'm sure there's something out there that you can find. So, you know, in the football world and the online world, it can get a bit vicious at times.
True.
And there was for a while, you could take it a little bit personally, but I think the best thing about it is knowing that the people who do like what I do really enjoy it, and I get great enjoyment out of that. And the people that don't like it, well, why should I care? But
give me a sense though because that's the kind of attitude that I wish I could rent from you at times when some of our stuff struggles. But give me a sense of how you've kind of got there, and you know, what were the kind of things that really got under your skin, or what couldn't you let go? You know what I mean?
I don't think it was anything in particular, but I think when you go through a difficult period as a football club, and this is back to football, you know, people get very angry, and then you realize that like you're getting so angry about something over which you have absolutely no control. And that's part of what's brilliant and beautiful about sport, is that you give yourself to this thing that you can't control, and when it goes in your favor, it's amazing, and when it doesn't, it's terrible and it's heartbreaking and everything else, you know. But the anger thing, just more and more, I didn't understand it. That why people would get so angry all the time, and so angry with other people, and you know, divisions between Arsenal fans, and you know, people calling each other the worst things possible. So I have a sort of policy on social media and Twitter and that kind of stuff, bar the very rare occasion if somebody's abusive or if somebody's, and you know, I just don't answer them, because I like to think that ignoring them kind of bothers them. I wish that there was, you know, because a lot of people will block. And then I think people get a bit of satisfaction out of that, because I wound you up to the point where you blocked me, you reacted. But if you keep poking and poking and nobody reacts, that's the ultimate. Eventually you just get bored of it. Now some people don't, because they're assholes. But you know, that just becomes part of it, and you have to sort of, I think it informs the way that you look at the world.
But I would assume you've been exposed to a fairly ridiculous level of craziness as the thing has grown, and there's millions and millions of people viewing and engaging with the content in the different platforms. You know, at any point have you gone, Jesus, what's going on here? Like, is this word, or have you always been able to filter it?
I've been able to filter it, but I think part of what made me able to do that was from the very start, I always wanted to maintain standards on the website. So look, we can disagree about something, but if you call me a dickhead, then no, relax. You can think this guy's great and I can think he's not, but there's no need for you to call me names. So we don't really allow that kind of stuff. We don't allow any obviously racism or homophobia or anything like that. Anything sexist. Football fans have grown up a bit, but there's still a profound element of sexism and homophobia in the game. So by creating a space where none of that is tolerated, I think you tend to attract relatively like-minded people for the most part. And then in a way, that community, I won't say it becomes self-policing, but people who are there because they enjoy what you're creating and maybe the interaction that they're having with other fans.
Gotcha.
And if somebody goes over the line, then we can deal with that, and we can ban them, and we can make sure that they don't visit the site again, or they have their privileges of commenting on articles revoked. And the policies are there. They're very clear on the website. If you want to comment, read this first. So use real English, for example. You're not allowed to use text speak. Small thing, but I think it makes a difference. You know. So and look, some people will, they'll write, "Oh, you are," with a U and an R, and I'll say to them, "Look, please read the comment policy. We don't allow that." And most people will go, "Fine." Every so often, some guy will go, "You're a fascist for not allowing this. How dare you?" Clearly, making you want to write in English is right up there with the worst of what fascists have done in this world. But
that's right. God bless them.
They're rare.
Yeah,
they're rare, the exception rather than the norm, thankfully.
Where is Arseblog going? It obviously it's on a certain trajectory, but where do you see it going?
Don't know. I'm not strategic. I probably should be, but I'm not sure I can be. So what tends to happen is I'll have an idea and I'll just do it. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't work, well, but no harm done, really. I haven't had any really stupid ideas. Could you ever see yourself at some point, I don't know, obviously at some point in the future, you won't be involved in it or someone else will, but can you see yourself saying, you know what, thank you very much, Arseblog, I'm putting you on the shelf there and tying a lovely little ribbon around you, and off we go. Do you ever think about that? Or some Sunday morning when you've been out on a Saturday night and you might have had a couple of pints and you wake up at 7:30 or 8 o'clock and you'd like to just turn over and lie down for another couple of hours, but you have to get up and make coffee and go upstairs and write a blog. There are moments when I consider, maybe I could take a day off or something. Not that I would pack it in, but look, it's just become so ingrained in what I do and part of my routine. That's the first thing I think of. In the morning, it's literally the first thing I think of. I wake up some mornings and the first line or the first paragraph of the blog is in my head, so I go upstairs and I write it and then I get on with my day. So no, I don't think so. I enjoy the work. I enjoy what we do. I enjoy football and watching Arsenal and writing about it, and ultimately, as I said, I could be going out doing a 9 to 5, coming home feeling safe and secure, but completely unfulfilled creatively. And what it does is it allows me, I've got this huge platform to be as creative as I want and do whatever I want with it. And people are willing to put up with some of my madness from time to time, which is great.
Well, listen, it is a wonderful thing, as our American cousins would say. In terms of your, let's say, your daily practices or your daily process, is there a place where you go and you blog your best, so to speak, or like, are you kind of, can you pretty much do it anywhere with any kind of a keyboard?
Obviously, when you're at home, I've got my office upstairs, so that's where I go. I make coffee, I go upstairs, I sit down, turn the computer on, see what's happening, and I write, and it's very much stream of consciousness stuff, but it's 1,000 words or 1,200 words or 1,400 words every day of the week, pretty much, which is a lot to write, and it very, very, very rarely feels like hard work or a chore. It can be challenging sometimes because there are quiet periods in a football season. There's a summer when there's nothing to talk about apart from transfer rumors, and as we all know, transfer rumors are about 95% bollocks.
Yeah.
So there's just, you know, you don't engage with that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So that can be a bit challenging at times, but that's part of what makes it great. That's what allows the creativity to happen.
And in terms of that creativity, what kind of constraints do you put around it? Like, for example, would you say, look, I'm going to write for half an hour, and at that point I'll just see what I have, and we'll edit it, or will you just go until it's flushed, so to speak? Yeah, just start and then it's finished.
Okay. There's no, I don't know how to explain it. You start writing and then you know it's finished.
Have you a sense of how many mornings you've now done? Have you totted it up?
Maybe someone with a calculator here can do it. So it started in February 2002, and bar maybe, I would say 20 days, I've written every single day.
Wow.
Apart from being on holidays and like someone else will fill on the blog, but there's been something on that blog every morning since February 27th, 2002. Wow. So that's
amazing.
Out. Yeah.
That's nearly worth a round of applause. Because maybe therein lies the secret of the success, or is that too glib for me to say? There's something around that consistency, is there not?
There is.
Pumping it out that builds whatever it is, credibility, loyalty, or whatever that is. And what have you seen in and around that?
Well, I just think it goes back to that thing of producing stuff on a consistent, regular basis, and that level of expectation. So the more we do, the more people expect. Mm-hmm. So we were doing one podcast, so now we do two podcasts. We used to do a match report, now we do a match report and player ratings.
Okay.
We used to just talk about a match beforehand, now there's a live blog for every match, so you can like follow text commentary for every match. Mm-hmm. So all these things people expect. So once you've created the beast, you have to feed the beast.
Yeah,
right?
That's it, right?
It's a bit like that.
Yeah.
But those are decisions that I've made, and once I got to live with them, that sounds like
it's almost like a Dr. Frankenstein thing. I have brought the beast alive. I must feed the beast.
Yeah, a little bit like that. Yeah, but in a very rewarding way. Yeah. And there'll be more things, and we'll think of new things to do, and we'll add them, and then people will expect them, and if we don't do them, people might complain, and then we'll do the things. Because that's what they want. And ultimately, when you're in a very what people might say is a silly business model. Which is producing content and then giving it away free. Yeah. It's like you don't build cars and then just give them away free, right?
Right.
You don't do. I know people look at writing as different, and people look at writers as people who can and will do stuff for free. People will ask you, would you write for my website, and we'll put a link back to your website. Yeah. And it's like, look, come on. You pay me or else. Yeah. I'm not doing it. That kind of thing. But what was the point I was making?
It was a good.
No,
I've got a better one for you.
No, but remind me. Seriously, I've forgotten what I was saying.
Was it Tottenham we were talking about?
No. We were talking
Man
about
United.
Talking about the business model of giving your content away for free. So to go down that road in the first place, some people might say is a little bit foolish. But the only way, it comes back to that thing of the more content you produce, the more visitors you attract to your site. The more visitors you attract to your site, the more revenue you can generate. Absolutely. And that's ultimately what it comes down to from our point of view. And we have other things that we use to generate revenue, but that's the nuts and bolts of it.
So give me a sense, I'm not asking for figures or anything, but just give me a sense of the degrees of monetization that you feel the Arseblog is at versus what it might be. Because if you got, let's say, bloodthirsty guys who would just say, screw the ethos of this, we'll just get the most of it, there's a certain amount. But then, let's say within the parameters of how you want it to be, how much greater potential is there?
We're certainly earning a lot less than we could. Yeah. the sheer amount, the numbers that we have would suggest we could generate a lot more revenue. The problem with that is that you're generating revenue that I think would be short term and ultimately damaging to the website. So you're looking at advertising types, you're looking at pop-ups and pop-unders and interstitials and ads that obscure the content. From my point of view, and I know what Richard was saying earlier about branded content, and I think it works really well on certain websites. It wouldn't work well on Arseblog. It just wouldn't. It doesn't fit in with what we do. So I can't all of a sudden do a post about Lucozade or about O2 or whatever it might be. We can't do that kind of stuff. We're not that, it's something that I try not to have on the site, because I feel ultimately what will happen is people will block the advertising on the site altogether. And I think it's a dangerous road to go down. If you
and it's beginning to happen, isn't it? With the various
of course, it's very worrying as well, because I don't think people realise, how reliant a site like Arseblog is, and many of the other sites that people read every day, whether it's their favourite blog or a fashion site or a news site or a sports site, they're all pretty much dependent on this revenue. And without that revenue, people can't get this lovely free content that they like so much. So, from time to time, I'll remind people and say, look, I understand ad blockers are a thing, but if you could whitelist Arseblog, that would be greatly appreciated. And people go, never even occurred to me just to whitelist the site, because they get so cheesed off with advertising and their browsing experience getting ruined by ads here, there, and everywhere, that they just blanket block everything. And they don't think about the consequences of that. I think it's a little bit worrying that some of these features are now easier, and particularly being built in with the mobile apps on iOS. It's worrying, because obviously so much of the traffic now comes from mobile. That's where a lot of the revenue comes from. And if people are just blocking the website, so I think there's an onus on people like me who produce a website that's reliant on advertising to make sure that advertising doesn't obscure or damage the content in any way, because ultimately it's the content that brings the people to the site.
Absolutely, isn't that right? So when you look back at, let's say, you mentioned about 2016 podcasting, and the second wave of podcasting has happened in the last 2 to 3 years. Do you think you'd be doing the podcasting only that Arseblog gave you, let's say, the channel, the medium, the tribe to communicate with?
Well, do you mean the other podcasting or the Arseblog podcasting?
Which led to the Castaway story, but the Arseblog thing.
Would I be doing it? I mean, I don't think anyone would do it if they weren't A, enjoying it, or B, people weren't enjoying it. So if you were doing a podcast every week and no one was listening because it was crap, then there wouldn't be much point in doing it. But, over the years, the audience has grown. We get, I think this month on Arseblog, we're going to do 800,000 downloads or listens to the podcast.
It's amazing.
Which is a lot. There's a big audience out there, and people respond to it very well. They feedback. There's great feedback. There's great interaction with readers and listeners, obviously. So it's that which, if you're getting satisfaction, A, from the work that you're doing, and B, from the reaction to the work that you're doing, then it gives you the enthusiasm to keep going.
So tell us about Castaway. How did that come about?
I had been listening to a podcast by a guy called Maron, called WTF. I'm sure a lot of people will know what it is, and loved it. And I was listening to him talk to people from films and TV and famous people, actors, actresses, singers, musicians, and I was kind of struck by A, because you view these people as not real in a certain way because they're on the silver screen or they're on television. You don't really view them as real, and then when you hear them, they become a bit more human to you. And I realized that these were just kind of people doing stuff. They were just doing stuff. Like you see them working really, really hard. And I listened to Bryan Cranston from Breaking Bad, obviously Malcolm in the Middle, and he told a story about how he took every penny that he made from Malcolm in the Middle and he plowed it into this film that he wanted to make and had no idea if it was going to be a success or not, but literally he put everything he had into making this film that I never heard of or never saw or it never came out here. And you think, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
He just done something that he wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do something else apart from Arseblog. I wanted to create more, to do more creative work. And I thought that putting more podcasts together, creating a podcast network might be the way to do it. And just sort of listening to those kind of people who didn't sit around and talk about what they wanted to do, they just went and did it.
Yes.
That was what was the spur to that. And getting over the fact that, you do worry sometimes, or you have these insecurities about, will people like what I do? And as I said to you earlier, I got to a point where I just didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't care, so I'll do it. And if they like it, so if people like it, great. And if they don't, what's the harm? I'm never going to meet any of them. They're not going to invite me to any parties, are they? So, So that was it. So that was the idea. And with the guy that I'm doing it with, Adrian, we decided, well, let's do it. So I rented an office on Leeson Street because we needed somewhere in the city centre, signed a 6-month lease, and then realised, quite how I missed it, I don't know, that we were opposite the biggest building site in Dublin. They knocked down the Canada Life building there on the corner of Stephen's Green. So when we put things together and put the microphones on, all you could hear was just like, the building was like, so luckily found another good space, and we've been in there since January, and we've been producing podcasts and getting things going slowly.
So explain the difference between having a podcast network and just producing a podcast. And I don't say just producing a podcast. That's obviously a different amount of work and capability required to do that. But how is Castaway set up to succeed? What does that look like?
The idea was quality first. Okay. So I'm quite pernickety about the sound of podcasts. So they've got to sound good. So if you're doing a podcast and it sounds like you're sitting in a bin, talking into an old telephone. Forget about it. You're going to have a limited reach. So part of that was quality, and just to create a platform where people could come, regardless of the interest that they had, whether it was sport or fashion or TV, whatever it might be, they could come, and if they find a podcast that is in that area, they'll know that it's a good quality podcast. So that's the ultimate, I think, the guiding light of it, to create good quality stuff, good sounding stuff that people want to listen to and want to share. Yes. And then to cater for a wide range of interests. But with audio and producing audio, there are no shortcuts at all. It's you want to record an hour of make an hour's podcast, the least amount of work you can do is 1 hour. And very often it's more than that. Yes, by the time you edit and you do all that. So that's really the idea. It's still fledgling. We're launching 2 new shows tomorrow, actually, which is quite timely. We're just kind of doing it. So I'm not quite sure yet. It just felt like we had to start it, rather than talk it. So get out there and start doing it, and then see how we can make things happen from a position where we've done something, rather than say, well, if we do this, can we do that?
I know.
So there's always the intangible. So let's do the thing first, and then see what we can make of it.
And what have you learned since you set it up? Like, what kind of surprises have you seen, especially in terms of how people are receiving it or embracing it?
I've learned that people are really bad at replying to email.
Okay.
So if you're trying to get somebody to be a guest, like you can email them and they just don't reply. And it's no big problem if you don't want to do a podcast. Just say, no thanks. And that's it. But people just don't reply to emails. It's bananas. What else have I learned? People are interesting, and sometimes the people you don't expect to have an interesting story really do, or the people that you think are going to be great are maybe not as interesting as you think they might be. So those are the 2 big things.
Now you mentioned Maron earlier. Is that the coolest thing that's happened in your podcasting era?
Yeah,
Mark Maron and your...
that was pretty cool. Yeah, that was pretty cool.
As you were sitting there, I think, you know, this whole 6 degrees of separation thing. That was only weeks after Mark Maron, for those of you who are not familiar, had sat down with Barack Obama in his studio, and there he was sitting in your studio in Dublin talking about it. It was only weeks, right?
Yeah, it was. Later. I think that was in June, and I met him in I managed to bag him for the podcast in September. Yeah. So it was. Yeah, I mean, it was a great experience to talk to him, because he's talked to everyone, and when you're talking to a guy who's talked to the president of the United States, it's a bit intimidating. Yeah. You know, it can be. Yeah. But maybe that then takes you out of your comfort zone.
Yeah. How did you? How were you feeling when you approached him? Did you think like, oh shit?
Well, I didn't think he was going to do it. What happened was, the writer John Ronson is a big Arsenal fan and follows me on Twitter. I follow him, and he did my podcast, and then he did the WTF podcast, and there was an announcement that Mark Maron was going to be doing a stand-up show in Vicar Street. So I thought, well, this is going to be this is great. So I emailed John and asked him if he would put in a word for me. And he did. He was very kind. He did that and gave me Mark Maron's email address. I sent him an email, no reply. About 2 weeks later, I just sent him another email saying, have you had a chance? And he was like, oh, I'm going to be tired. Yeah. You know, I'm going to be jet lagged. Yeah. I'm not sure. I can't commit to this. Yeah. But it wasn't no.
Okay.
So,
good nose for that.
So it wasn't a full-on no. So the morning he arrived in Dublin, I'd found out when he was arriving. So the morning he arrived in Dublin, I sent him another email and said, look, come on, man, it'd be great to talk to you. And here's a picture of my dead cat. Okay. Seriously. I took a picture of my we had a cat called Bill the cat, and when we lived in Barcelona, I took a picture out of the window, and he was sitting in a windowsill down from me. He was just looking at me like that, and you can see like the street. We're like 6 floors up, and it's a really just a cool picture of a cat. And Mark Maron's a big cat guy. Okay. And my wife said, you know, you should just send him that picture of the cat. He'll love that, because you know he loves cats. So I don't know if that's what swayed it. I said, look, you know, here's a picture of my dead cat. He'd want you to do it. Okay. And I went home. I was in the studio actually in town. I went home and I was just sitting down at the computer, and this was about 3 o'clock, and an email came in, and it was from him, and he's quite not very expansive in his email. He said, let's do it at 4:30. I was like, oh, fuck. Wow. So I had to run around and get back into town and met him, and I'd arranged to meet at the hotel at 4:30, and I was early, you know. I have this pathological fear of being late for anything. I don't like it, so I was really early. So I was about 4:15 walking up Grafton Street, and then I was like, "That's too early. You're going to be coming across really needy here." Yeah. So I said, I'll stand there on Grafton Street. I'll check my Twitter and just watch the world go by for a bit. I was standing there outside. It's a Burger King, I think, somewhere near the top of Grafton Street. I was checking my phone, and this guy walked by, and I went, "That guy looks like Mark Maron." Oh. Fuck, it's Mark Maron. There he is. So I went, "Hey, Mark," and he went, jet lagged, smoking a big cigar, and seemingly he didn't think me chancing upon him on the street was weird and creepy and stalkery or anything like that. So we walked down to the studio, which is on South William Street. We sat outside a coffee shop there on South William Street, so he could have a coffee, finish his cigar. I was convinced a car was going to come around the corner and just plow him out of it, or he'd faint from tiredness, and you know, rather inconsiderately, he might have to go to hospital rather than do the podcast. I know. So eventually, we got upstairs and did the show, and it was great fun. It was fun, you know.
So I'm going to end on the clumsiest segue ever. From Mark Maron to Larry Gogan. When you look at Larry Gogan, do you think, Jesus, I would love to be Larry Gogan, whatever that man is, whether he's 80 years of age or whatever he is right now, and he's still broadcasting happily? Does that fill you with joy? No.
Well, for him, I think it's great, you know, to be as long in the radio business as he is, and to be as respected in the radio business as he is not easy. It's really not easy, and he's a really nice guy. I interviewed him for the podcast. He's just very nice man. But I think in the constraints of the way radio works these days, I'm not sure that I would get the right creative fulfillment from that job. You know. Sure. So I think I'm happy doing what I'm doing and being able to do it on my own terms, I think.
Well,
Yeah.
please keep doing that and keep growing. Ladies and gents, Mr. Andrew Mangan.